The desert was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until you can almost hear your own blood moving. The sun was sinking, dragging the horizon into shades of red and gold, painting the desert with a beauty that could never hide its brutality. Out here, life was fragile. And death always waited just beyond the next dune. A lone border patrol truck idled on the dirt road, engine humming softly, dust still floating like ghosts in the fading light. Agent Daniel Cruz stepped out, his boots crunching on gravel. He adjusted his belt, his hand brushing against the cold steel of his sidearm, not out of fear, but out of instinct. A ritual burned into him after years of service. To anyone watching, he looked ordinary. A mid-level agent doing a routine stop. Just another man in uniform patrolling the endless borderlands. But appearances are lies. Because Daniel Cruz was not ordinary. Years before, he had worn a different uniform. A darker one. He had trained in jungles where every step could mean death. He had survived deserts where men melted under the sun. He had fought wars in silence, in shadows, in places most people couldn't even point to on a map. He had been a weapon. A ghost. A nightmare to enemies who never saw him coming. But all of that was behind him, or so he believed. He had traded the battlefield for the border. Guns for a badge. Missions for patrol shifts. A quieter life. A safer one. Until tonight. Daniel noticed the dust first. A thin line rising in the distance, shimmering in the dying light. Engines. Heavy ones. The kind that didn't belong to ranchers or lost travelers. His gut tightened. Instinct. That sixth sense only warriors carried. Then he saw them. Two black SUVs, moving fast, their headlights like predators' eyes in the dusk. They weren't lost. They were hunting. Daniel's hand reached for his radio, but the desert swallowed the signal. Static hissed in his ear as the SUVs closed in. He had seconds. Maybe less. His other hand brushed his sidearm, but a voice inside told him it wouldn't matter. Not against this many. The vehicles skidded to a stop, sand exploding around them. Doors slammed open in unison, and masked men poured out like shadows given flesh. Black clothes. Tactical vests. Rifles gleaming in the fading light. Not amateurs. Professionals. One of them barked in broken English, "Hands up. Do it now." The muzzle of his rifle dug into Daniel's chest. Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He studied them. Their stances. Their weapons. Their eyes hidden behind masks but betraying nerves. He could tell which one was the leader by the way he stood back, letting others do the work. This wasn't random. This was an operation. Planned. Precise. But why him? Plastic zip ties cut into his wrists as they bound his hands, forcing him to his knees. Dust filled his mouth as one of them shoved his head down. The desert sun finally slipped behind the mountains, leaving the world cloaked in shadows. For most men, this was the end. Outnumbered. Outgunned. Kidnapped by a cartel with no mercy. But Daniel Cruz wasn't most men. They shoved him into the back of an SUV, boots pressing against him, rifles always aimed. The vehicle roared to life, bouncing over rough terrain. Inside, the air stank of gasoline, sweat, and fear. Daniel kept his breathing steady. He didn't struggle. He didn't speak. Instead, he listened. A soldier's mind never rests. He counted every second between turns. Every bump in the road. Every voice, every accent, every nervous laugh. He mapped the route in silence, committing details to memory with the precision of a machine. The men mocked him, calling him gringo, laughing at how easily he was taken. One pressed a boot into his chest, sneering in Spanish. But Daniel didn't react. He had learned long ago that silence was stronger than words. Silence unnerves captors. Silence makes them wonder what you're thinking. And Daniel was thinking of everything. He was already turning the walls of his prison into weapons. After what felt like an eternity, the SUV skidded to a stop. Dust exploded into the night air as Daniel was yanked out. Ahead, dim lights flickered against the black horizon. A compound. Remote. Isolated. Perfect for making men disappear. A steel door slammed behind him, sealing him in. Inside, the air was damp, the stench of mold and blood mixing into something foul. A single light bulb flickered overhead, buzzing like a dying insect. Chains hung from the ceiling, rust-stained and heavy. They shoved him into a chair, binding him with ropes thick enough to restrain a bull. A black hood was pulled over his head, plunging him into darkness. But even in the dark, Daniel smiled. A small, cold, dangerous smile. Because the cartel thought they had captured prey. But in truth, they had trapped themselves in a cage with a predator who had been waiting far too long to be unleashed. The hood stayed on for what felt like hours. Time is cruel when you can't see it pass. Every second stretches into eternity. But for Daniel, this wasn't torture, it was training. Darkness was no stranger. He had endured it in cages on foreign soil, in bunkers where enemies tried to break his mind, in jungles where night itself hunted him. The cartel didn't know it, but the hood was giving him an advantage. When one sense is taken, the others sharpen. He listened. Boots on concrete. Heavy. 2 guards outside the door, maybe 3. Their steps had rhythm. One limped slightly, the scrape of a boot that dragged just enough to betray an old injury. Another shifted his weight often, impatient, nervous. Daniel painted them in his mind as if he could already see their faces. Then, the door screeched open. Hands grabbed his shoulders, jerking him upright. The hood was ripped away, and the world slammed back into view. The single bulb overhead blinded him for a moment, flickering like a dying star. His eyes adjusted quickly. He scanned. Always scanning. Concrete walls. No windows. A steel door. A table in front of him, scarred with cigarette burns and knife marks. Behind it, 3 men. One with a gold chain thick enough to pay for a house. Another with a tattoo crawling up his neck like a snake. And in the middle, calm, confident, cruel, sat the leader. His name was Rafael Ortega. At least, that's what Daniel would learn later. For now, all he saw was a man who thought he was in control. Rafael leaned back, studying Daniel like a specimen. His smile was thin, his eyes darker than the room itself. "You work for the Border Patrol," he said in Spanish. His voice was low, oily, dripping with arrogance. "That makes you an enemy." Daniel said nothing. The man with the chain slammed his fist on the table, shouting, "Answer him." Still, Daniel was silent. His face blank, his breathing steady. To the cartel, it looked like defiance. But in reality, it was a strategy. Silence forces men to fill the void. They reveal more than they intend. Raphael leaned forward. "Do you know why you're here?" Daniel finally spoke, his voice calm, measured, almost cold. "Because you made a mistake." The room shifted. The men laughed, but their laughter was nervous. Even Raphael's smile faltered for a second. A prisoner should beg. A prisoner should plead. A prisoner should fear. Daniel did none of those things. The chain man slammed his hand on the table again, this time pulling a knife and pressing it against Daniel's cheek. The blade traced his skin lightly, leaving a red line. "You think you're tough, gringo? We'll see how long that lasts." Daniel stared into his eyes without blinking. A stare so heavy, so unwavering, it was like looking into the abyss. The man shifted uncomfortably, his confidence cracking. Raphael noticed. He raised a hand, signaling the knife away. "Not yet," he said quietly. "This one's different. I can smell it." Daniel's silence was working. They tried questions. They demanded names. Routes. Codes. Daniel gave them nothing. Instead, he let them talk. They argued in front of him, forgetting that silence listens. He learned things, their smuggling routes, their fear of rival cartels, even hints of corruption in local law enforcement. Every word they spoke was a weapon, and Daniel was stockpiling ammunition. Hours passed. Beatings came. Fists. Boots. A chair kicked out from under him. Blood dripped from his lip, his ribs ached with every breath. But Daniel absorbed it like stone absorbs rain, quietly, without breaking. Because pain was nothing new. Pain was a teacher. And he had been its student long before these men were old enough to hold guns. When they finally grew tired, Raphael stood. He leaned close, his breath hot against Daniel's ear. "You think you can resist us? But everyone breaks. Tomorrow, you'll beg." He gestured, and the guards dragged Daniel to a smaller room. They chained him to a pipe in the corner, the stink of mold and rust thick in the air. A single crack in the ceiling let in a sliver of moonlight, just enough to paint the room in silver. The guards left, the steel door clanging shut. Silence returned. Daniel leaned back against the wall, feeling the cold concrete against his skin. His body throbbed with pain, but his mind was sharper than ever. He closed his eyes and replayed everything he had seen, everything he had heard. Every voice. Every habit. Every weakness. The cartel thought they had broken him. But in truth, they had given him something priceless, time. And Daniel Cruz knew exactly how to use time. Because while they slept, while they laughed, while they celebrated capturing a border agent, he was already planning. Calculating. Waiting. They thought tomorrow he would beg. But tomorrow, someone else would bleed.